Hi, this is Darren from SimNation again. Um, Wanted to talk to you a little bit about RPO this week. For those of you not familiar, RPO is run pass option. It's a form of offense that you can play with in Draft Day Sports College Football 2023. The reason why I'm covering it is it's one of the newer additions, newer plays within the game. For those of you who know me well, I've wanted RPO for a while. Don't really kill for pistol, but RPO has been something I've wanted within it because a lot of college teams run in RPO. That, along with spread, are probably two of the uh, very prevalent forms of offense within college football. Um, just a general reminder, SimNation has a Draft Day Sports College Football 2023 league. It's called SNCFL. Within that league, I actually have 3 teams. I'm also the commissioner. I do use all three. With all 3 of my teams, I do use a variant of RPO. So first tip about RPO is interlace it with pass and run plays. Now in SNCFL, we have to do that because we have it set to where you have to have 10 run plays, 10 pass plays. Because of how RPO is categorized within the playbook, it's categorized as RPO, so it doesn't count against the run or the pass. 10 play limit, so you have to add in 10 other plays, 10 run, 10 pass. So you end up with 20 plays. Within RPO, if I remember correctly, there's 33 RPO plays. So if you were to do that, you would end up with like 53 plays. It's a little bit too much, but what you'll do as you go through with any offense is you're going to trim off the plays that don't work, and I'll kind of give you a guide for how to do that with RPO. So how do you start an RPO offense? What I have up in front of you is not SNCFL. This is a test league. I will tell you that I use RPO very effectively at Maryland in SNCFL. One of the reasons why is I have a good quarterback, and I have fast wide receivers who are also agile, have great hands, and I have the right running backs, and I have the right offensive line, I have the right tight ends, so it made sense for me to do it. I have not run RPO as effectively at LSU, who don't really have all those things. LSU runs a very small set of RPO plays that just benefit the fact that they have a strong-armed quarterback. So one of the first things you need to think about with RPO is what type of RPO do you want to be, and the type of players you have are going to kind of dictate that. So if we go in here and we look at our roster, and by the way, I played three games in because I wanted you to be able to see the stats and see some things rather than me just start it and then you're like, well, how is it working for you, right? So with quarterback, depending on type of RPO you want. So if you want to do a run-based RPO, what I would say is your quarterback should have intelligence, accuracy, speed, agility, and hands. Skill is a non-negotiable. You should have that in any offense you run, right? Now, if you're going to do a pass one, you can drop the speed and the agility, and you can focus on the intelligence and accuracy. Arm doesn't come into play as much with RPO as other offenses because a lot of the plays that you're running are short passing plays. Now, there are a few that have bombs in them. They run streaks, or they run posts, or they run flies. Those plays, you will want to make sure you have a quarterback who can actually throw it though. But generally speaking, with Maryland, I'm running a pass-oriented RPO. So as you can see, my starter, he just keeps getting hurt, which is ironic because he has a 90 endurance. But he has an arm of 85. It's not great, but he can make some plays. He's got high intelligence. He is agile. He does have speed, but he's just getting necked up, so I've started to change it. The guy who's actually starting right now is this guy. He has a decent arm. He's not going to be able to throw flies very well, but he's highly smart. He's pretty accurate. I wouldn't say highly. And he's doing well inside this. Running back matters, but I'll tell you, if you're trying to do a run-based RPO, the running plays are weak at best with RPO. One of the reasons has to do with the fact that there's not a defined percentage of runs. And I know why they classified RPO as RPO, and it makes complete sense to me. if you were to classify RPO as pass, the label, right? When your running back runs the ball, it's going to show up as pass or catch, and you'll notice that your running back isn't getting much, right, on the ground. If it was classified as a run, when they do the small passes to the running back, it would be classified as a run. So that's the reason for the RPO tag. It makes sense to me, and I know this because I played with it. For those who not aware, is you do have the ability in leagues to customize your play set, especially if you know XML, plug for XML, right? Because what it will allow you to do is go in there and see the percentages, change the percentages of the plays. I will say that I am in process with SNCFL of actually doing that, where I'm adjusting the RPO plays to allow for more running, the right type of running that will help the RPO be better with the run. As it stands today, RPO is not a great option for run, which is why you need to lace in run plays. Because if you rely on that alone, you're going to see a lot of 2s and 1s, and it just won't be very effective. But in theory, what you really need for RPO to be successful as an offense, especially a pass one, is you need running backs who are good blockers. And you also need running backs who can come out of the backfield and do well. So that's going to be speed, it's going to be hands, it's going to be blocking. Agility, for when you modify it to actually have the run plays work, will be important, because agility and strength when you're going between the tackles. So inside running or power running schemes. So right now the actual starter on the plays is Shaw and Meikle. You can see Meikle is my scat back. He's very fast. Shaw is more my strength back. So, I'll get into that in a minute, but I don't really use a fullback. Now, offensive line is important, but what I will tell you is traditionally what you want with an offensive line is you want the ability to be able to block on the run. So a lot of the RPO plays do use pulls. So in order for a pull to be successful with an offensive lineman, you need to have some speed. I would generally say above 50. You can get away with 40, by the way. And you need to have agility. Strength is not as important in RPO because you're not doing stand-up blocking. I will say that traditionally, you notice I don't really have good guards, right? They're pretty bad. So because I'm doing pass-oriented, Saldivar, I think I said his name right, is the main guy I have, and he is really focused on being, I think he's my left guard if I remember correctly, so he's my blindside guard. And then I'm really leveraging this guy, Munez, because, again, he's a decent pass blocker. He's second best I have. I could use Sumner because he also is. Running is not important to me because I just don't have the people to pull off the run. Tackles, again, same thing, right? You want to have speed, you want to have agility, and then you want to have them, depending on what you're running, is if it's run blocking, you want to be able to focus in on that, right? So I think the key here is just make sure with your offensive line they map generally to having some speed, having some agility, and then they map to having the right type of blocking you're doing. So again, I'm doing pass, so I'm going to really focus on the people who are the best pass blockers with some run blockers. So like I would go with Bird because he's a combination of both and he's pretty good. I have played with Silva because I think he's also good, but I landed on Conyers. And then, of course, just going again, Sentinel holds the same thing. Sentinel matters less because the Sentinel's not going to pull on most plays, so you don't need speed there. But again, you want to focus on what you really want to get out of the RPO. So the main things for pass-oriented RPO are tight end and wide receiver. Now, here's the thing about tight end. Tight end, if you're running shotgun, pro set, I formation, 2 tight end, spread, you've got to have a decent tight end for RPO to work. And that means a lot of different things. It means run blocking, of course, pass blocking in some cases. And it means that you've got to have someone who has speed and agility. And the reason for that is the RPO, a lot of the plays, especially in those formations I just mentioned, rely on the tight end to catch the ball a very large percentage of the time. And then when they're not catching, they got to be able to block. And this is going to be the same for wide receiver, by the way, is you need to have good blocking wide receivers. Because if you're going to run, or if you're going to run the screens, if you're going to run some of the shorter passes, you've got to have someone who can do it. And those are things like bubbles and peaks and stuff like that. So Wiseman is my main tight end. If you notice, he's got good speed. His hands suck, but I can live with that. And then he's a decent blocker on both pass and run. Holiday's in two tight end sense, I use Holiday because he isn't as fast. He's got good hands though, and he is a really decent blocker. Both of them are pretty agile, so that means in short passing games they're going to do well because of their agility. We talked about wide receiver. General rule of thumb for passing RPOs, you need to have at least 4 good wide receivers. And that means speed, blocking, and agility are really the things you're thinking about. Skill, again, mentioned earlier, is non-negotiable. So if you look at this, I'm struggling a little bit now because of the fact that my wide receivers are getting hurt. Part of that has to do with the run blocking. I will tell you what I have noticed in the game is a larger percentage of players get hurt in RPO than on regular plays. Now, it's not drastic, right? But I have noticed that my wide receivers, when I run RPO, especially predominant RPO, they get hurt more, which may make sense because I'm blocking more and they're doing other things. But one of the things about RPO, and we'll talk about this in a second with the plays, is the reason why I say you got to have 4 good ones is because in order for RPO to work, especially in any formation, is you should have 2 good ones to start. If you're playing I formation, pro set, 2 tight end. If you're playing shotgun or shotgun 4, you need to have 4 because you're going to have, in shotgun, you're going to have 3 plus a tight end. Shotgun 4, you're going to have 4 on the field at a time. And where they line up is going to be very important. So if you notice, I've got a pretty good wide receiver core. Hands are not great, but again, speed does matter, especially because I favor the ones where they'll put on flies or posts or outs where speed matters. But otherwise, agility will work as well. Just avoid the long throws if you're doing that and focus more on the short passing game. And there's a lot of options though. So that's kind of the offense. I'm not going to go into that ad nauseum. So now let's go to strategy, right? So RPO wise, you need to decide again, are you run or pass? If you run, you're going to be under 50 on a lot of the run pass weight. If you pass, I would say go kind of hardcore, go above 70. And I'll show you why in a second. The most important settings here is you want to be as balanced as you can. So passing preference, you want to do kind of balanced. Your primary wide receiver should be your best wide receiver, regardless of where they line up. And then what you want to make sure of is if you want the quarterback to run, you need to make sure this is on often. The way RPO plays are stacked today is the quarterback really doesn't choose to run very often unless you have that set. Now, when we do the SNCFL's playbook at the end of the season, a lot of the plays I'm testing right now will actually have the quarterback run and it'll treat it as a run as opposed to you having to rely on the tuck and run. I don't care about defense. I'm not going to talk about defense here. So formations, one of the things we're going to talk about when I get to my playbook is SG shotgun 4 wide receiver. You're going to want to set a formation for shotgun 4 wide receiver. Everything else largely uses a tight end. Shotgun 4 doesn't. So for the plays that use tight ends, you can have them be on one set of personnel package and then shotgun 4 on another. Now, if you notice what I have here, and I illustrated this time, is my default offense is I formation, pro set, 2 tight end, spread 2, I think, actually. Although spread, I think I should probably put under shotgun 4. But I'll leave that alone for right now. And then shotgun 4, I have my own, which is set hill, and that's the second ones. I'm letting the CPU do the coaching here. I'm not doing as much other than tweaking and adjusting plays, mostly because I want to see how the CPU does with me doing very little. So these percentages are actually the CPUs. I just went in and changed it to make sure shotgun 4 was its own. Now, when we get to the playbook, what you're going to notice real quick is I have interlaced. I don't have many pass plays because I'm just running RPO pass plays. I do have run plays in here. And part of that is running will not be effective if you just do RPO. Now, here's the thing. As you go through these plays, and we'll pick on I formation, RPO, stretch, left bubble. I'm going to go over here, and so everyone is aware. I did some pre-work here. I ran different plays using a simulation thing that I built that allows me to see kind of what the percentage are that a receiver gets it. Now, this is important because a lot of coaches assume that every play, the percentages are close to normalized, meaning that one guy will have 30, another guy will have 30, and maybe 10 or something like that. That's not the case with these plays, and it's very important that you kind of understand the percentages based on the plays you're going to run, because it will dictate the success. Because I've watched some people play, and I'll pick on my favorite, right? Where is it? Is if you look at SG4, actually SG4 RPO read streaks. A lot of people assume the streak is the left wide receiver, right wide receiver. So wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, right? It's not. It's actually wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4, whether you call 3 the flank or whatever you call it, right? And the 4th wide receiver. The 2 streaking are actually the 2 interior ones, which means that the 2 external ones are not getting the ball as much. So the 2 interior ones are roughly about 40 to 45%, and then the 2 external ones are getting it roughly about 5% of the time. So that's important to know, because if you want this play to work and you decide to stick your 2 best wide receivers out at left wide receiver and right wide receiver, they're not going to get the ball very often. The interior ones are. So important thing to realize, right, about this play. And I think I have it on the wrong one. So yeah. So in this case, this one's relatively easy, right? Because this is a stretch bubble. 4 is what they call player 4 will get it. Player 4 kind of roughly corresponds to, if you think about it this way, the quarterback is 0, the tailback is 1, the fullback is 2. Number 3 is traditionally going to be this guy over here, so that's your right wide receiver. And then 4 is going to, it's your left wide receiver. 4 will be your right wide receiver. So this is the guy getting the ball right here. And he's going to get it 100% of the time. Same thing with stretch bubble. On the opposite side is, again, think of it this way. This is 0. This is 1. This is 2. And in this case, if you think about it, number 5 is getting it. I want to stretch right up. Number 4 is getting it. So it's very important. It can get very confusing. I get confused sometimes. So I have a cheat sheet that I use, and it's actually on the screen right now, is how I kind of see it. To remind myself when I look at these is 2 is fullback, 3 is tight end, 4 is left wide receiver, 5 is right wide receiver. So if I'm looking at the stretch left bubble, I may have that backwards. Yeah. And then stretch right will be 4 is getting it 100% of the time. So very important to look at that. Now, we're going to these are relatively straightforward. Now, in this case, let me find the one I'm referring to. Well, we'll use looky, right? Because looky is an important one that a lot of people look. So in the case of RPO, looky is, this is 4 wide receivers again. So 0, 1, right? In theory, this is how the running back would run. The running back will run. It's not going to be very effective because that's a bad running route. Actually, if I were to fix this, I would either have them doing a counter or an off tackle or sweep to clear, but we'll leave that alone, right? So 2 is going to be so again, the 2 will be right here, 3 will be here, and then 4 is here, 5 is here. So it's important because on this specific play, 2 is going to get the ball 50% of the time, and that's like an inside slant. 3 is going to get the ball roughly about 25% of the time. 4 will get the ball 25% of the time, and 5 will get it 5% of the time. So if you line up your best wide receiver in this formation here, they're not going to get the ball very often. This guy's going to get it a lot. And this kind of goes back to the tight end, right, that I mentioned earlier. The reason why I say you got to have a really good tight end to run an RPO is when we go to the shotgun plays, let's find one. And I'll use an easy one. I think RPO stick is one. Yeah. So on this one's relatively easy because everybody on this side is blocking. And this gets back to you got to have good blockers, right? Your receivers need to have the ability to pass block or run block. If they don't have that, you're going to have some mixed results with the passing because they use a lot of bubbles, a lot of screens, where the wide receiver is going to be expected to block. But in this case, on this play, he's going to get the ball about 50% of the time. He's going to get the ball about 50% of the time. So this isn't bad because this is wide receiver 1 on the depth chart, and I'll show you that in a second. This is the tight end. But when you go to another play, which is like zone peak, I think it is, yeah. So zone peak, you look at this, and most coaches would start salivating because they're like, hey, look, that guy's on a streak. I'm going to be imperfect. I'm going to have a great time with that. No, you're not. Because this guy's getting the ball 70% of the time. So, and then this guy's going to get it roughly about, I'm on zone peak, 10% of the time, and then he's going to get it 20. So a lot of people have asked me about how to make this work is you got to understand these percentages because it tells you where to put people. It's the reason why I use a different formation for shotgun 4 is because when we go to my depth chart, what you're going to notice really quick, and I'll show you this, is go shotgun 4, and I'm going to do this because this will make more sense. So Vincent Jones is right here. He's not very fast. He's got great hands, and he's agile. Because I'm not going down the field that often, he's not going to get the ball a lot in this formation. I don't want to have wide receiver. And if you're ever not sure, a good way to do it is this. This will actually line it up for you so that you can see that this is wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Little confusing because the way the game sees it, this is wide receiver 5, or this is player 5, player 4, player 3, player 2. And that matters because the way the game is structured with the percentages is on some plays, this person's going to get the ball a lot. So why that matters is if you've noticed, wide receiver 4 is the backup to wide receiver 1. So when you're doing your depth charts, keep this in the back of your mind if you're going to run an RPO using shotgun 4. If you're going to run an RPO running shotgun, not probably as important because it'll be the first 3 wide receivers. It's just, again, bearing in mind that as you think about the percentages, and if you're struggling, what you may want to do is go back in and look at your depth chart and say, wait a second, I'm running shotgun. I'm running a lot of the power right. But what I'm noticing is my first 2 wide receivers are not getting it. This guy's getting it. Well, that's because on power right, wide receiver 3 is actually getting it 60% of the time. That's why they're getting it more. So what you want to do is adjust and move the right person into that play. So I don't have a problem with how they did this, by the way, and I want to be clear on that. Now, the modifications I'm making for SNCFL is I'm equalizing some of these plays, except for when the play calls for something specific. So when you do something like Z tight end slant wide receiver in, what that's really saying is that the tight end is going to go on a slant, the wide receiver is going to go on in, the other two wide receivers are blocking. So just keep that in mind. But again, in this case, I have Matthew Mattingly in that 3 slot for a reason, because he will be able to do this. And like with spread, again, just think of it this way: tight end will be number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So back to the plays, and I'm just going to run through this quickly because I think it's important that you know this. I'm toying with whether I should put it in the notes or not. I may, only because I think it's important that you know this. But I want to be careful with it because, again, if you're running a custom league and your league changes the plays, this isn't going to be universal for you. This is out of the box. So, like, if you come into SNCFL and go down, I watched your video and it's not working, well, it's because we've adjusted some of the plays. And because we've adjusted some of those plays, or especially next season, let's just say you come in next season, you'll be like, well, this doesn't work. It's because I adjusted the percentages on the play. So it's not the same thing. In that case, I'm going to try to equalize it a bit to make it a little bit easier. So at the end of the day is when you look at PS RPO 1, it's this one, you can kind of see what everybody's doing. Again, 0, 1, 2. Now, when we look at 3, which is the tight end, he's going to get 25%. 4, who's the left wide receiver, is going to get 30%. 5 is going to get a 30%. If we go to shotgun 4, RPO alert screen, this one's relatively easy. The right wide receiver is going to get 100% of the time because of the fact that he's the only person, but the other ones are all blocking. This one is important to make sure you have a good blocker because he's going to be the one blocking the most. And if you notice, on my depth chart, I actually put a good blocker in the 2 slot. Yeah, it's easy to get very confused. So I have a good blocker on the 2 slot, this guy, and it's the reason why I'm doing really well with that play. Counter peak is going to be 50-50, so 2 slot gets 50% of the time, he gets it 50% of the time. And then again, they're blocking because in theory this guy is running the ball, so these two need to block. Now again, you want to lace wheel run plays in because it'll keep the defense off balance somewhat and allow the play to work. I talked about looky already. Power lefts, again, this is what I was talking about with the linemen. The guards need to have the ability to pull, so you got to have some speed, you got to have some agility there as well as run blocking. But in this case, these two are the predominant ones who are going to get it, and this is power left, so it'll be 50-50. When we go to power right, 50-50, same thing, right? Read streak, this is one that is one of my favorites actually, and I use this one very well at Maryland, but he's going to get it 45% of the time, 45% of the time, and then these two are essentially doing screens or bubbles, and they get it 5%. So this is what I was referencing before, is you want to make sure that wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 are getting the ball, or some of your fastest people, because they're streaking down the field, which means that it's essentially just a straight run straight and throw the ball. And if they're not fast, they're not going to get the corner or the safety. Now, one of the things with RPO is, again, if you know a team's playing a lot of RPO on defense, you need to account for that and make sure your nickel backs are faster. Because one of the things RPO can do, especially in a human league, is if you're not thinking about that and you're lining your best corners up against right wide receiver and left wide receiver, because that's wide receiver 1 and 2, you're going to get shredded if your safeties or your nickelbacks are not fast enough to deal with the 2 interior wide receivers. And on the flip, on the offensive side, you gain from that, right? So maybe a reason to play that one a little bit more. And then when we get into pistol read, which is a shotgun one, This is a read bubble. Again, so blocking will bubble 50% of the time. He will catch it on a hook roughly about 50% of the time. So each one of these 100%. So when you only see one doing something, that's 100%. When you see two doing something, like this is what pistol power left. So it'll be this guy is catching at 60. This guy is catching at 30 and 10. And then again, somewhat similar. One of these plays is actually the same. So when you look at pistol power right, again, 60, 30, 10. So, and then we drag post. I could just continue to read these. I think I'm just going to put it in the notes for you and just, it'll help you from a game planning perspective. But the key here is in the RPO, the biggest thing that you need to account for is these two interior receivers are going to get the ball a fair amount, and shotgun, tight end's going to get it a fair amount. So you want to make sure that as you do this, that you are taking care of those things and doing that. So that's one of the biggest keys to success with RPO is understanding that your interior wide receivers are actually probably the most important wide receivers along with your tight end, and then aligning your strategies to that fold. So that's kind of it for tonight. Some of you ask how I'm doing. So if we look at the stats, and this is an RPO pass offense, right? I mentioned Jeffrey just keeps getting hurt, but you can see I'm completing a high percentage amount of the passes. It's again because I'm doing what I said I'm doing. I mapped where I think that the wide receiver was most important and made sure I had the best catchers and the best speedsters in those positions. So passing is really off the charts. I'm doing well, and this is how Maryland is in SNCFL, right? But again, I maybe use I think like 5-6 RPO plays at Maryland. In this case, I'm using R33. Running, you're going to notice it's not a good story. Part of that is just because of the fact that the RPO, I'm not running a run-based RPO. I'm focused on the pass, and so Shaw's really struggling. But receiving-wise, you can see I have a pretty good spread. I mentioned Cantu is doing well because he's in that wide receiver 4 slot, and he's shredding it. I think Lyle Weiss is his backup, if I remember correctly. But he's getting the ball quite a bit. On this, I'm not getting many pancakes, but I'm not getting a lot of sacks either. So 3-0 have done well. Don't judge me on the defense. I'm letting the coordinator play defense. Otherwise, these may be like 53-7, 53-10, but it's fine. Now, there is one other thing I want to talk about is how do you trim your playbook? And this is important because I've kind of talked a lot about this in the past on offense. With the RPO, you want to treat it like a run. Anything less than 3 is probably not being successful, and you should get rid of it. So in theory, if I were trimming, I would go like this. These are less than 3. I'm going to get rid of them because even running the ball, they're not doing well. So what I'm going to end up with is I'm going to end up with essentially those plays that will give me more than 3 yards because I'm treating it as a run, which what you're going to notice is a lot of the shotgun ones are going to go away. I will say that, again, one of the reasons why I decided in SNCFL that I wanted to go in and revisit these is they're not effective running the ball, and that needs to be tweaked. And then go there, so we're good. I think I have 1, 2, and I'll leave read stick. Read stick's not that bad. Now, of course, again, I just went in blindly, did that. Normally, you look see how many plays. If it's only 2 plays, leave it in. Unless both plays are interceptions, then get rid of it. But if you have 11 plays and you're averaging 2 yards per play, you should get rid of it, trim it. And then we should be very successful going forward. So I will probably put some of the percentages in there. Again, it varies. I toy with why I would not, because again, if you're playing in another league other than SNCFL, these percentages aren't going to matter. This is just fresh out of the box. So if you're at home playing this and you want to be successful, I would say just make sure that you understand how many times the people are doing that. And if you're playing in a sandbox league at home, you actually can go in and look at it and see it. I think you can edit the play. That's one way to see it. If you know XML, you can actually export the plays and you can look at the plays that way, and it will help you understand that as well. The problem with, of course, human leagues is a lot of leagues actually modify the playbook, so it's not going to work as easily. And in a human league, the only person who can export it is the commissioner. The only reason why I'm aware of some of these from an XML is, again, because I'm using XML to get the new playbooks ready for next season. And I will probably, in full transparency, post it to the whole league so that they're aware of it. We're not using those playbooks yet, because when we start to use them, I want to make sure everyone knows the percentages. And in real life, a coaching would know that. It'll help you a little bit. And of course, on the defense side, if you know the percentages as well, you can say, okay, I noticed that Gary is running pistol read stick, so I know that I need to focus on his tight end and I need to focus on his wide receiver, because one of those two is going to get the ball. And again, the beauty of RPO is, yes, there are certain plays where most of the people are blocking, but in a lot of them, people are running routes. And if you equalize the RPO, which is what I'm trying to do with SNCFL's playbook, makes it a lot harder for defense to lock in on you. Because if you're throwing the ball 30%, 30%, 30%, 10%, whatever that is, or 25% across the board, in theory, everyone has an equal chance of getting the ball. It's going to be a little bit harder for the defense to just lock in on you. Versus what I'm talking about now, you could lock in on that. So this is kind of RPO. Again, it can be used very successfully. The key takeaway for it is understand the plays, understand where you position your people on the depth chart, and trim off the ones that aren't working. Make a very early decision on whether it's pass or run RPO. I will tell you right now, do not do run RPO unless you're putting a lot of option plays in your playbook. Make sure you do lace in run and pass plays, because it helps effectively keep the defense off just locking in on the RPO. And when they lock in on the RPO, you'll get a lot of ones and stuff like that. So, and then the last thing is just make sure that you understand what's important in an RPO. You do need to have some offensive line people with some speed, because they're going to be pulling on certain plays. If you don't use those, maybe you don't care as much. Quarterback-wise, intelligence and accuracy matter. If you're going to go with the deep plays, you need to have an arm. Running backs, again, you want people who can catch the ball out of the backfield. You also want to have traditionally whatever it is that you're running play-wise. And then for wide receivers, you want to make sure they can block, because there were a lot of plays where they're blocking. Tight end, same thing. Although tight end, you want to make sure you have speed. So that's it for now. If you have any questions, drop something in the comments and I'll answer it as best as I can. But the other thing about it is, I will tell you that SNCFL is still looking for coaches. I think we're in week 11, week 12, if I remember correctly. Feel free to come out, join us. It's a great community with great coaches. And we'd love to have you. We share a lot through our Slack channel, predominantly Slack. But at any point, anybody will help you with it. Right now, I think it's going to be an interesting run of things in the league, because there are quite a few undefeated teams and a lot of teams just knocking on the door. Of course, we moved to 2023. We're running a 16-team playoff, so that's 10 conference winners, 6 at large. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic this year because that's the first year it's happening. Louisiana Monroe is the two-time defending champion. They're run by Skelter, who is a long-standing member of the league and probably one of the most brilliant minds in the league. So I would encourage you to join. And of course, the pro league that backs up SNCFL is WWPF. They just flipped over to 2023. A big plug for Gary and Frankie. I would say look at joining them. They have open teams as well. That's a great community, even though Peter keeps winning the title. But I would say definitely look to join. You'll be up against some of the best coaches in online leagues. So I'm going to wrap it up. If you have any ideas of what you want me to cover in the future, let me know. But this was RPO, and hopefully it helps you to be a little bit more successful. Thank you and have a great night.